Vogue, I'm Blake Lively, and this is my life and looks. Here we go.
In the unfolding drama that has come to symbolize the blurred lines between celebrity power, legal overreach, and public accountability, Blake Lively's ongoing legal battle is no longer about a singular incident, has evolved into a cautionary tale of a public figure allegedly abusing the legal system to retaliate against criticism. What began as a defamation lawsuit connected to disputes over a controversial film and sexual harassment allegations against co-star Justin Baldoni has now ballooned into a sprawling saga involving subpoenas aimed at private citizens, anonymous social media accounts, and online creators, many of whom merely voiced dissent or skepticism over Blake's version of events. This escalation was initially shrouded in ambiguity, with Blake presenting herself as a victim seeking justice and, for a time, the public, including prominent content creators and commentators, believed her. Her allegations, particularly when amplified by outlets like the New York Times, carried an aura of legitimacy, cloaked in the weight and credibility of institutional journalism. But as the legal documents began surfacing in movements like Movement on X, formerly Twitter, gained traction in compiling and exposing the underlying facts, the narrative started to unravel. The same creators who once sympathized with her now express anger and disbelief, calling her tactics retaliatory and her legal maneuvers a blatant misuse of the court system. One such creator, Lauren, famously pointed out that while Blake may have initially garnered support due to her celebrity and the seriousness of the allegations, the facts and, more importantly, Blake's own conduct have completely reversed that sentiment. What has shocked many is Blake's decision to go after not just prominent voices, but also ordinary users, including a former high school acquaintance named Lynette, and anonymous accounts like Swifty Forever, who merely participated in online discussions about the lawsuit. These individuals were served subpoenas in what critics are calling a clear intimidation tactic meant to silence critical discourse under the guise of legal discovery. Legal filings from these users have argued, compellingly, that Blake's subpoenas serve no purpose other than retaliation. They point to the First Amendment, reminding the court that criticism, even if misinformed, is protected speech, and that forcing private citizens to unmask themselves or surrender personal data in response to commentary about a public figure is both chilling and unconstitutional. Blake's attempts to sidestep this core principle by treating negative social commentary as orchestrated smear campaigns has drawn significant backlash from both civil rights advocates and legal experts. The motions to quash these subpoenas argue that unless Blake can provide compelling direct evidence of a coordinated defamation campaign, her attempts to gain access to critics' identities should be rejected outright. Interestingly, in many of these cases, Blake's team has quietly withdrawn the subpoenas after motions to quash were filed, an action interpreted by many as an admission of the weakness of her position. This pattern of issuing aggressive legal threats and then backing down when challenged has painted a damning picture that Blake is more interested in the appearance of legal pursuit than the actual pursuit of justice. Even the judge, while technically siding with Blake on certain procedural matters, has refrained from imposing sanctions, likely because doing so would require acknowledging that Blake's use of the court system might indeed be abusive. One troubling element repeatedly raised is Blake's reliance on what is known as litigation privilege, a legal concept that protects statements made in legal documents from defamation claims. Critics argue that she's hiding behind this shield to say defamatory things about others, especially Justin Baldoni, without consequences. The complaint she filed with California's Civil Rights Department, CRD, for instance, contained explosive allegations against Justin, many of which were publicized in media coverage. But legal experts contend that those statements were not part of a formal court proceeding and should not qualify for litigation privilege, making her use of them both unethical and potentially defamatory. Still, because the judge deemed the CRD complaint to be public record, the statements made therein remain legally protected, giving Blake carte blanche to wage a reputational war through quasi-legal channels. The broader community, including the Movement account, has not taken this lightly. Movement has emphasized how all the data they use is publicly accessible, showing followers exactly how they obtain information and encouraging independent verification. Far from orchestrating a smear campaign, their actions represent a digital age watchdog effort, one that resists powerful figures trying to rewrite public memory through institutional muscle. That Blake is targeting this group, even as it operates within the bounds of legality and transparency, underscores what critics are calling a larger culture of celebrity entitlement. In particular, Blake's failure to respond to dozens of motions to quash speaks volumes. Instead of defending the necessity of each subpoena, her team has resorted to strategic withdrawals, seemingly to avoid legal sanctions. This has led some commentators to ask, if Blake genuinely believes these subpoenas are critical to proving her case, why backtrack so quickly? The answer, many believe, is that she doesn't actually want to win these cases. She wants to intimidate, to exhaust critics with legal fees, and to silence opposition through fear. That tactic, unfortunately, is not new in Hollywood, where a pervasive mindset of ask for forgiveness, not permission, allows high-profile figures to make questionable moves with the assumption that they can clean up the fallout later. In Blake's case, she may believe that withdrawing problematic subpoenas will absolve her of responsibility. But the public record tells another story, one where each of these documents reflects a conscious choice to leverage power against private citizens. For a celebrity who often frames herself as a champion of women's rights and empowerment, this contradiction is striking, especially because the majority of people Blake has targeted are women's female creators, female critics, female peers, all of whom used their voices to speak against what they perceived as falsehoods or exaggerations. That irony has not gone unnoticed. Many in the commentary space have now shifted focus from Blake's original claims to the broader implications of her actions. What does it mean when someone with enormous reach and resources uses the legal system not to seek justice, but to muzzle dissent? And what responsibility does the court bear in allowing this? Calls have intensified for the judge overseeing the case, Judge Lyman, to place stricter controls on Blake's discovery tactics. Some have even accused the court of being complicit by failing to demand transparency and proportionality. The fact that Blake has issued so many subpoenas without prior court approval is alarming to legal scholars, who warn that unchecked subpoena power can quickly transform civil litigation into a tool of oppression. The sentiment echoed in Lauren's open letter to the court pleading for protections against further abuses gained traction among followers and media alike. But despite the chorus of criticism, there's little indication so far that the judge is willing to rein in Blake's actions decisively. Meanwhile, Swifty Forever's motion to quash, filed under Jane Doe, highlights another disturbing trend: anonymous users being unmasked simply for participating in public debate. The account's legal filing emphasizes that their posts were not defamatory but were instead personal commentary on a public issue. Suggesting that such participation constitutes criminal behavior or a paid smear effort is not only baseless, the motion argues it's defamatory in and of itself, and it reflects a fundamental misunderstanding or willful disregard for the First Amendment. Blake's insistence that all criticism must be coordinated, monetized, and malicious implies a worldview where dissent is not organic but always a This paranoid framing, legal experts argue, sets a dangerous precedent where powerful people can weaponize litigation to erase the gray areas of public discourse. Ironically, the very things Blake claims to protect: free speech, accountability, and justice are the things her opponents believe she is trampling over. As the July 31st deadline approaches for additional motions to quash, the tension in this case shows no sign of dissipating. Even if Blake withdraws all pending subpoenas, the damage is done. Trust has eroded, reputations have been impacted, and a chilling effect has already spread across the digital space where creators once felt safe expressing skepticism. More than a few now admit they avoid saying Blake's name entirely out of fear of retaliation. And perhaps most damning of all is the observation that Blake seems more focused on silencing critics than proving her original claims in the court of public opinion. Her credibility has nosedived. Gone is the image of the brave whistleblower. In its place stands a figure accused of arrogance, hypocrisy, and legal manipulation. What's left now is a growing call for institutional accountability for Blake and the court system that has thus far enabled her. The celebrity machine may have protected her for a while, but as this case drags on, it's becoming increasingly clear that no amount of PR spin can undo the perception that Blake Lively has misused her platform, weaponized the law, and turned a legitimate legal process into a theater of retaliation. In the ever-unfolding drama between content creators and powerful Hollywood figures, Blake Lively has found herself ensnared in a growing public backlash that she once believed she could silence with legal threats, subpoenas, and intimidation tactics. But now, that plan appears to be crumbling fast. Blake, perhaps underestimating the resilience and collective strength of online voices, began her campaign by targeting a number of independent creators with subpoenas that many legal analysts now argue were rooted in little more than personal vendettas and fear of criticism, rather than any solid legal basis. These subpoenas, which demanded sensitive private data like bank account details, location tracking information, and even credit card numbers, struck many as an outrageous overreach. And rightly so. Content creators quickly pushed back, filing motions to quash the subpoenas on the grounds that they violated First Amendment rights, lacked evidentiary support, and served only to intimidate and silence those with unfavorable opinions about Lively's behavior. In the It ends with this promotion debacle and the lawsuit against Justin Baldoni. Among them was Katie Joy, a prominent creator who boldly spoke out about being subpoenaed by Lively, detailing how Blake's legal team failed to provide any real proof to justify their aggressive actions and, even worse, failed to communicate meaningfully with the people they were targeting. Katie, who recently spoke with News Nation's Paula Froelich, was featured in an article titled "Desperate and Narcissistic: Blake Lively's Campaign Against Content Creators," which essentially served as the first time a mainstream media outlet echoed what many online had been feeling for months, that Blake was engaged in a scorched earth crusade against anyone who dared criticize her. regardless of whether they had any actual connection to the Baldoni legal team. The article and interview highlighted not only Blake's increasingly erratic behavior but also pointed out that many of these creators, including Katie, had never been in touch with Justin's camp. Instead, their concerns emerged independently, sparked by Blake's public actions and the compelling evidence posted on lawsuit.info.com, a site dedicated to tracking and analyzing the case. According to the article, Blake seems utterly unwilling to consider the possibility that the criticism she's receiving might be deserved. Her paranoia has fueled what is now being described as a reckless legal campaign, one that has, ironically, unified a group of independent voices into a coalition that now stands stronger, louder, and more connected than ever. Katie herself reflected on this strange silver lining, noting how Blake's legal attack inadvertently fostered a sense of solidarity among creators, turning them from isolated individuals into a network of mutual support and resistance. In court, however, Blake's legal strategy has begun to unravel. After filing motions to withdraw subpoenas against some creators, the judge ruled that the motions to quash were moot but refrained from issuing sanctions, a decision that many we found frustrating but also telling. It showed that Blake was backpedaling, trying to quietly escape the consequences of her actions, perhaps in hopes that the storm she created would somehow dissipate, but the creators weren't having it. One particularly powerful response came from a creator known as Lethal Lauren, aka Court of Random Opinion, who wrote a letter to the judge condemning the subpoena as a clear attempt to chill free speech and intimidate individuals who had merely voiced an opinion. Lauren pointed out that Blake's team had not offered any coherent explanation for why such intrusive data was relevant, nor had they responded meaningfully to attempts at communication. The subpoena, Lauren argued, was not only baseless but dangerous, setting a precedent that could threaten every independent journalist and online commentator in the space. Her words struck a chord with many. Ms. Lively's subpoena targeted creators who expressed unfavorable opinions, and was not supported by any evidence. It served to intimidate, harass, and chill constitutionally protected free speech. The fact that Blake's legal team couldn't clarify why they needed personal financial data or GPS locations only added to the perception that this was never about justice, it was about silencing dissent. Lauren also called out the misrepresentation of intent by Blake's legal counsel, noting that despite public claims that subpoenas would be withdrawn, the actual legal follow-through was minimal, if not non-existent. She emphasized that her views and those of others emerged independently and were based on public facts and court filings, not on some secretive, coordinated smear campaign as Blake's team absurdly implied. The court may have found no grounds for immediate sanctions, but the tide of public opinion is clearly turning. More content creators have begun sharing their stories, and legal experts have started weighing in on how Lively's actions, especially the targeting of women, may have long-term reputational consequences. This case has transcended a typical celebrity lawsuit and has morphed into a broader discussion about power, speech, and the way Hollywood wields its legal machinery against critics. Katie Joy, speaking on News Nation, highlighted the importance of resisting intimidation, sharing that despite the stress of legal threats, she's more committed than ever to exposing unethical behavior, not just Blake's but others like Robert Shin, the cult leader recently raided by the FBI and featured in Netflix's Dancing for the Devil. Her appearance on Banfield is expected to shed more light on this and other pressing issues, reinforcing the role of independent journalism in uncovering truths that powerful figures would prefer remain buried. Ironically, Blake's attempt to control the narrative has instead amplified the voices of those she hoped to silence. In trying to paint herself as the victim of a smear campaign, she has instead revealed a deeply insecure public figure, rattled by criticism and willing to weaponize the courts to protect her image. But the more she retreats behind legal maneuvers, the more transparent her motives become. At the heart of it all is a chilling reality. If Lively had succeeded in her campaign, it could have emboldened other celebrities and public figures to do the same, using baseless subpoenas to frighten creators into silence. Fortunately, the resistance has been swift and effective. Content creators, especially women, have shown they won't be bullied into silence. They've fought back with facts, legal filings, and powerful public commentary, and the outcome has been a cultural shift in how we view celebrity accountability. Blake Lively's reputation, once pristine and tightly managed, is now mired in controversy, not because of a PR misstep, but because of deliberate legal action taken against those she hoped to crush. And as more revelations come to light, and more creators speak out, it's increasingly clear that this story is far from over. What began as a legal move to silence a few critics has ignited a much larger movement, one that demands transparency, justice, and respect for the fundamental right to speak the truth, no matter how inconvenient it may be for those in power.